Othello. The Tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice, is a tragedy by William Shakespeare, believed to have been written in 1603. It is based on the story Un Capitano Moro, a Moorish Captain, by Cinthio, a disciple of Boccaccio, first published in 1565. The story revolves around four central characters: Othello, a Moorish general in the Venetian army; his beloved wife, Desdemona; his loyal lieutenant, Cassio; and his trusted but ultimately unfaithful ensign, Iago. Given its varied and enduring themes of racism, love, jealousy, betrayal, revenge and repentance, Othello is still often performed in professional and community theater alike, and has been the source for numerous operatic, film, and literary adaptations. Characters. Plot. Othello costume, illustration by Percy Anderson for Costume Fanciful, Historical and Theatrical, 1906. Act 1. Roderigo, a rich and dissolute gentleman, complains to his friend Iago, an ensign, that Iago has not told him about the secret marriage between Desdemona, the daughter of a senator named Brabantio, and Othello, a Moorish general in the Venetian army. Roderigo is upset because he loves Desdemona and had asked her father for her hand in marriage. Iago hates Othello for promoting a younger man named Cassio above him, whom Iago considers less capable a soldier than himself, and tells Roderigo that he plans to use Othello for his own advantage. Iago convinces Roderigo to wake Brabantio and tell him about his daughter's elopement. Meanwhile, Iago sneaks away to find Othello and warns him that Brabantio is coming for him. Brabantio, provoked by Roderigo, is enraged and will not rest until he has beheaded Othello. But he finds Othello's residence full of the Duke of Venice's guards, who prevent violence. News has arrived in Venice that the Turks are going to attack Cyprus. Therefore Othello is summoned to advise the senators. Brabantio has no option but to accompany Othello to the Duke's residence, where he accuses Othello of seducing Desdemona by witchcraft. Othello defends himself before the Duke of Venice, Brabantio's kinsmen Lodovico and Gratiano, and various senators. Othello explains that Desdemona became enamored of him for the sad and compelling stories he told of his life before Venice, not because of any witchcraft. The Senate is satisfied once Desdemona confirms that she loves Othello, but Brabantio leaves saying that Desdemona will betray Othello. Look to her more, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father, and may thee. Iago, still in the room, takes note of Brabantio's remark. By order of the Duke, Othello leaves Venice to command the Venetian armies against invading Turks on the island of Cyprus, accompanied by his new wife, his new lieutenant Cassio, his ensign Iago, and Iago's wife, Emilia, as Desdemona's attendant. Act 2. The party arrives in Cyprus to find that a storm has destroyed the Turkish fleet. Othello orders a general celebration and leaves to consummate his marriage with Desdemona. In his absence, Iago gets Cassio drunk, and then persuades Roderigo to draw Cassio into a fight. Montano tries to calm an angry and drunk Cassio down, but end up fighting one another. Montano is injured in the fight. Othello re-enters and questions the men as to what happened. Othello blames Cassio for the disturbance and strips him of his rank. Cassio is distraught. Iago persuades Cassio to importune Desdemona to convince her husband to reinstate Cassio. Act 3. Iago now persuades Othello to be suspicious of Cassio and Desdemona. When Desdemona drops a handkerchief, the first gift given to her by Othello, Emilia finds it, and gives it to her husband Iago, at his request, unaware of what he plans to do with it. Othello re-enters and vows with Iago for the death of Desdemona and Cassio, after which he makes Iago his lieutenant. Act 3, Scene E, is considered to be the turning point of the play, as it is the scene in which Iago successfully sows the seeds of doubt in Othello's mind, inevitably sealing Othello's fate. Act 4. Iago plants the handkerchief in Cassio's lodgings, then tells Othello to watch Cassio's reactions while Iago questions him. Iago goads Cassio on to talk about his affair with Bianca, a local courtesan, but whispers her name so quietly that Othello believes the two men are talking about Desdemona. Later, Bianca accuses Cassio of giving her a second-hand gift which he had received from another lover. Othello sees this, and Iago convinces him that Cassio received the handkerchief from Desdemona. Enraged and hurt, Othello resolves to kill his wife and asks Iago to kill Cassio. Othello proceeds to make Desdemona's life miserable, hitting her in front of visiting Venetian nobles. Meanwhile, Roderigo complains that he has received no results from Iago in return for his money and efforts to win Desdemona, but Iago convinces him to kill Cassio. Act 5. Roderigo attacks Cassio in the street after Cassio leaves Bianca's lodgings. Cassio wounds Roderigo. During the scuffle, Iago comes from behind Cassio and badly cuts his leg. In the darkness, Iago manages to hide his identity, and when Lodovico and Gratiano hear Cassio's cries for help, Iago joins them. When Cassio identifies Roderigo as one of his attackers, Iago secretly stabs Roderigo to stop him revealing the plot. Iago then accuses Bianca of the failed conspiracy to kill Cassio. Othello confronts Desdemona, and then strangles her to death in their bed. When Emilia arrives, Othello accuses Desdemona of adultery. Emilia calls for help. The former governor Montano arrives, with Gratiano and Iago. When Othello mentions the handkerchief as proof, Emilia realizes what her husband Iago has done, and she exposes him, whereupon he kills her. Othello, belatedly realizing Desdemona's innocence, stabs Iago but not fatally, saying that he would rather have Iago live the rest of his life in pain. Iago refuses to explain his motives, vowing to remain silent from that moment on. Lodovico apprehends both Iago and Othello for the murders of Roderigo and Emilia, but Othello commits suicide. Lodovico appoints Gratiano Othello's successor and exhorts Cassio to punish Iago justly. Date and context. The earliest mention of the play is found in a 1604 Revolves office account, which records that on Halama's Day, being the first of Newembark, the King's Majesty's players performed a play in the banqueting house at Whitehall called the Moor of Venice. The work is attributed to Shakespeare. The Revolves account was first printed by Peter Cunningham in 1842, and, while its authenticity was once challenged, is now regarded as genuine, as authenticated by A.E. Stamp in 1930. Tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice, as it hath been times acted at the Globe, and at the Blackfriars, by His Majesty's Sarowens, written by William Shakespeare, London, printed by N.O. for Thomas Walkley, and are to be sold at his shop, at the Eagle and Child, in Britain's Burrs, 1622. Quote, 1 year later, the play was included among the plays in the first folio of Shakespeare's collected plays. However, the version in the folio is rather different in length and in wording, as the editors of the Folger edition explain. The folio play has about 160 lines that do not appear in the quarto. Some of these cluster together in quite extensive passages. The folio also lacks a scattering of about a dozen lines or part lines that are to be found in the quarto. These two versions also differ from each other in their readings of numerous words. Quartos were also published in 1630, 1655, 1681, 1695, 1699 and 1705. Analysis and criticism. Race. Portrait of Abd al-Wahid bin Masoud bin Muhammad an-Nun, Moorish ambassador to Queen Elizabeth I in 1600, sometimes suggested as the inspiration for Othello. Although characters described as Moas appear in two other Shakespeare plays, Titus Andronicus and The Merchant of Venice, such characters were a rarity in contemporary theatre, and it was unknown for them to take center stage. There is no consensus over Othello's ethnic origin. E. A. J. Honigman, the editor of the Art and Shakespeare edition, concluded that Othello's race is ambiguous. Renaissance representations of the Moor were vague, varied, inconsistent, and contradictory. As critics have established, the term Moor referred to dark-skinned people in general, used interchangeably with terms such as African, Somali, Ethiopian, Negro, Arab, Berber, and even Indian, to designate a figure from Africa or beyond. Quote, Michael Neal, editor of the Oxford Shakespeare, notes that the earliest critical references to Othello's color, Thomas Rymer's 1693 critique of the play, and the 1709 engraving in Nicholas Rowe's edition of Shakespeare, assume him to be sub-Saharan, while the earliest known North African interpretation was not until Edmund Kean's production of 1814. Artist William Mulready portrays African-American actor Ira Aldridge as Othello. The Walters Art Museum. Othello is referred to as a Barbary horse and lascivious Moor. In 3:3 he denounces Desdemona's supposed sin as being black as mine own face. Desdemona's physical whiteness is otherwise presented in opposition to Othello's dark skin. 5:2 That whiter skin of hers than snow. Iago tells Brabantio that an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. In Elizabethan discourse, the word black could suggest various concepts that extended beyond the physical color of skin, including a wide range of negative connotations. Othello was frequently performed as an Arab Moor during the 19th century. He was first played by a black man on the London stage in 1833 by the most important of the 19th century Othellos, the African-American Ira Aldridge, who had been forced to leave his home country to make his career. The first major screen production casting a black actor as Othello did not come until 1995, with Lawrence Fishburne opposite Kenneth Branagh as Iago. The American Revolves 1979 production shows Clayton Corbin and Karen West as Othello and Desdemona. In the second plate, West is seen with Marie Goodman Hunter, an African-American actress, as Emilia. The race of the title role is often seen as Shakespeare's way of isolating the character, culturally as well as visually, from the Venetian nobles and officers, and the isolation may seem more genuine when a black actor takes the role. But questions of race may not boil down to a simple decision of casting a single role. In 1979, Keith Fowler's production of Othello mixed the races throughout the company. Produced by the American Revolves Company at the Empire Theater, renamed the November Theater in 2011. In Richmond, Virginia, this production starred African-American actor Clayton Corbin in the title role, with Henry K. Bow, a Hawaiian actor of mixed ethnicity, playing Iago. Othello's army was composed of both black and white mercenaries. Iago's wife, Emilia, was played by the popular black actress Marie Goodman Hunter. The 2016 production at the New York Theater Workshop, directed by Sam Gold, also effectively used a mixed-race cast, starring English actors David Oyelowo as Othello and Daniel Craig as Iago. Desdemona is played by American actress Rachel Brosnahan. Cassio is played by Finn Whitrock, and Emilia is played by Marcia Stephanie Blake. Themes: Iago versus Othello. Although its title suggests that the tragedy belongs primarily to Othello, Iago plays an important role in the plot. He reflects the archetypal villain, and has the biggest share of the dialogue. In Othello, It is Iago who manipulates all other characters at will, controlling their movements and trapping them in an intricate net of lies. He achieves this by getting close to all characters and playing on their weaknesses while they refer to him as honest Iago, thus furthering his control over the characters. A.C. Bradley, and more recently Harold Bloom, have been major advocates of this interpretation. Other critics, most notably in the later 20th century, after F.R. Leavis, have focused on Othello. Othering. As the Protestant Reformation of England proclaimed the importance of pious, controlled behavior in society, it was the tendency of the contemporary Englishmen to display society's undesirable qualities of barbarism, treachery, jealousy and libidinousness onto those who are considered other, religious and philosophical. The title, Moor, implies a religious other, of North African or Middle Eastern descent, though the actual racial definition of the term is murky. The implications are religious as well as racial. The hero. There have been many differing views on the character of Othello over the years. A.C. Bradley calls Othello the most romantic of all of Shakespeare's heroes. By hero, Bradley means protagonist, and the greatest poet of them all. On the other hand, F.R. Leavis describes Othello as egotistical. There are those who also take a less critical approach to the character of Othello, such as William Hazlitt, who said, "The nature of the Moor is noble, but his blood is of the most inflammable kind." Performance history. Pre-20th century. Othello possesses an unusually detailed performance record. The first certainly known performance occurred on the 1st of November 1604, at Whitehall Palace in London, being mentioned in a Revel's account on El Alma's Day, being the 1st of November, 1604, when the King's Majesty's players performed a play in the banqueting house at Whitehall called The Moor of Venice. The play is there attributed to Shakespeare. At the start of the Restoration era, on the 11th of October 1660, Samuel Pepys saw the play at the Cockpit Theatre. Nicholas Burt played the lead, with Charles Hart as Cassio. Walter Clune won fame for his Iago. Soon after, on the 8th of December 1660, Thomas Killigrew's New King's Company acted the play at their Vere Street Theatre, with Margaret Hughes as Desdemona. Probably the first time a professional actress appeared on a public stage in England. It may be one index of the play's power that Othello was one of the very few Shakespearean plays that was never adapted and changed during the Restoration and the 18th century. As Shakespeare regained popularity among 19th-century French romantics, poet, playwright, and novelist Alfred de Vigny created a French translation of Othello, titled Le Moor de Venise, which premiered at the Comédie Française on the 24th of October 1829. Famous 19th-century Othellos included Ira Aldridge, Edmund Kean, Edwin Forrest, and Tommaso Salvini, and outstanding Iagos were Edwin Booth and Henry Irving. 20th century. The most notable American production may be Margaret Webster's 1943 staging starring Paul Robeson as Othello and Jose Ferrer as Iago. This production was the first ever in America to feature a black actor playing Othello with an otherwise all-white cast. There had been all-black productions of the play before. It ran for 296 performances, almost twice as long as any other Shakespearean play ever produced on Broadway. Although it was never filmed, it was the first lengthy performance of a Shakespeare play released on records. First on a multi-record 78 RPM set and then on a 3LP one. Robeson had first played the role in London in 1931 in a cast that included Peggy Ashcroft as Desdemona and Ralph Richardson as Roderigo, and would return to it in 1959 at Stratford-on-Avon with co-stars Mary Ure, Sam Wanamaker and Vanessa Redgrave. The critics had mixed reactions to the flashy 1959 production, which include Midwestern accents and rock and roll drum beats, but gave Robeson primarily good reviews. Actors have alternated the roles of Iago and Othello in productions to stir audience interest since the 19th century. Two of the most notable examples of this role swap were William Charles Macready and Samuel Phelps at Drury Lane, and Richard Burton and John Neville at the Old Vic. When Edwin Booth's tour of England in 1880 was not well attended, Henry Irving invited Booth to alternate the roles of Othello and Iago with him in London. The stunt renewed interest in Booth's tour. James O'Neill also alternated the roles of Othello and Iago with Booth. The American actor William Marshall performed the title role in at least 6 productions. His Othello was called by Harold Hobson of the London Sunday Times the best Othello of our time. His Othello was captured on record in 1964 with J. Robinson as Iago, and on video in 1981 with Ron Moody as Iago. The 1982 Broadway staging starred James Earl Jones as Othello and Christopher Plummer as Iago, who became the only actor to receive a Tony Award nomination for a performance in the play. The 1943 run of Othello, starring Paul Robeson and Uta Hagen, holds the record for the most performances of any Shakespeare play ever produced on Broadway. When Laurence Olivier gave his acclaimed performance of Othello at the Royal National Theatre in 1964, he had developed a case of stage fright that was so profound that when he was alone on stage, Frank Finlay, who was playing Iago, would have to stand off stage where Olivier could see him to settle his nerves. In 1997, Patrick Stewart took the role of Othello with the Shakespeare Theatre Company, Washington, D.C., in a race-bending performance. In a photo-negative production of A White Othello with an otherwise all-black cast, Stewart had wanted to play the title role since the age of 14. So he and director Jude Kelly inverted the play so Othello became a comment on a white man entering a black society. Canadian playwright Anne-Marie MacDonald's 1988 award-winning play Goodnight Desdemona, Good Morning Juliet, is a revision of Othello and Romeo and Juliet in which an academic deciphers a cryptic manuscript she believes to be the original source for the tragedies, and is transported into the plays themselves. 21st century. Othello opened at the Donmar Warehouse in London on the 4th of December 2007. Directed by Michael Grandage, with Chiwetel Ejiofor as Othello, Ewan McGregor as Iago, Tom Hiddleston as Cassio, Kelly Riley as Desdemona, and Michelle Fairley as Emilia. Despite tickets selling as high as 2,000 on web-based vendors, McGregor and Riley's performances received largely negative notices. Ejiofor, Hiddleston and Fairley all received nominations for Laurence Olivier Awards, with Ejiofor winning. Stand-up comedian Lenny Henry was the latest big name to play Othello. He did so on a tour at the start of 2009 produced by Northern Broadsides in collaboration with West Yorkshire Playhouse. Opera Otello, a 4-act opera with an Italian libretto by Francesco Maria Berio di Salsi and music by Joe Aquino. Rossini was first performed at the Teatro del Fondo, Naples, on the 4th of December 1816. The opera deviates from Shakespeare's original in some aspects. Iago is less diabolical than his Shakespearean counterpart. The setting is Venice rather than Cyprus, and the composer and librettist provided an alternative happy ending to the work, a common practice with drama and opera at one time. Giuseppe Verdi and librettist Arrigo Boito adapted Shakespeare's play to Otello, an Italian grand opera in 4 acts that was first performed at the Teatro alla Scala, Milan on the 5th of February 1887. It was Verdi's second-to-last opera, followed by another Shakespeare adaptation, Falstaff, and is considered by many his greatest. The popular opera attracts world-class singers and is found in the repertoire of prominent opera houses. Verdi and his librettist dispensed with the first act of the play. Franco Zeffirelli's 1986 film version of Verdi's opera starring Placido Domingo as Othello was nominated for the BAFTA for Foreign Language Film. On the 25th of February 1999, Bandana, an English-language opera in a prologue in 2 acts with a libretto by Irish poet Paul Muldoon, and music by Darren Hagen, was performed by the Opera Theatre at the University of Texas in Austin. The opera is set in 1968 on the United States Mexican border and borrows elements from Cinthio's tale, Shakespeare's play, and Verdi's opera. Ballet. Mexican choreographer José Limón created a 20-minute, 4-character ballet called The Moor's Pavane to the music of Henry Purcell in 1949. The work premiered at the Connecticut College American Dance Festival in the same year. American Ballet Theatre was the first dance company outside Limon's to include the work in its repertory. It is a standard in dance companies around the world, and notable interpreters of the Moor include Rudolf Nureyev. The ballet Othello was choreographed by John Neumeier to music by Arvo Part, Alfred Schnittke, Nan Vasconcelos et al., and was premiered by the Hamburg Ballet in Hamburg on the 27th of January 1985, with Gamal Gauda as Othello, Gigi Hyatt as Desdemona, and Max Medina as Iago. The work remains in the repertoire of the Hamburg Ballet, seeing its 100th performance in 2008. In 2002, modern dance choreographer Lara Lubavitch created a full-length ballet in 3 acts based on the Shakespeare play and Cinthio's tale, with a score by Elliot Goldenthal. The work has been staged by the San Francisco Ballet with Desmond Richardson, Yuan Tan, and Parrish Maynard in the principal roles. The ballet was broadcast on PBS's Great Performances. Dance in America, and the program was nominated for an Emmy Award. The ballet is recorded on Culture Video. Othello was first performed in New York City at the Metropolitan Opera House, the 23rd of May 1997, by American Ballet Theatre. Other ballets include Prologue, choreographed by Jacques d'Amboise for the New York City Ballet in 1967 as a prequel to Shakespeare's play, Othello, choreographed by John Butler to the music of DVOR. K for Carla Fracci and the La Scala Theatre Ballet in 1976, and a version choreographed by Jean-Pierre Bonfou for the Louisville Ballet in the 1980s. Film. Lawrence Fishburne and Kenneth Branagh as Othello and Iago respectively, in a scene from the 1995 version of Othello. The American actor James Earl Jones performs Othello's Act 1. Scene 3 monologue from Shakespeare Othello at the White House Evening of Poetry, Music, and the Spoken Word on the 12th of May 2009. Between 1948 and 1952, Orson Welles directed The Tragedy of Othello, The Moor of Venice, produced as a black and white film noir. The film stars Welles as Othello and Suzanne Cloutier as Desdemona. The troubled production was filmed over the course of 3 years, as well as time and money permitted, in Mogador, Morocco and Venice. Lack of funds and costumes forced Rodrigo's death scene to be shot in a Turkish bath with performers wearing only large, ragged towels. The film won the Palme d'Or at the 1952 Cannes Film Festival. Unlike Welles's film, Stuart Berge's Othello, based on John Dexter's National Theatre Company's production, starring Laurence Olivier, brings issues of race to the fore, with Olivier putting on an African accent and entering in a large ethnic necklace and a dressing gown. He commented, however, that he did not dare to play the Moor as a full-blooded Negro. One contemporary critic found the coloration too much, commenting that Olivier was blacker than black, almost blue. Trevor Nunn's 1989 version, filmed at Stratford, cast black opera singer Willard White in the leading role, opposite Ian McKellen's Iago. The first major screen production casting a black actor as Othello would not come until 1995 with Lawrence Fishburne opposite Kenneth Branagh as Iago. Not that there have been many major screen productions of Othello. Most film versions to date have been filmed stage productions. It was made during the O.J. Simpson trial, and commentators such as Cartmel draw parallels between the two whodunit murder stories, and wondered if the film's release was not a little to do with the publicity surrounding Simpson's drama. A modernized, loose retelling, completed in 1999 and released in 2001, featured African-American actor Mekhi Phifer in the lead role, which was renamed from Othello to Odin James, or O.J. Quote, with the story set in an American high school and revolving around sports rather than warfare. Malayalam film Kaliyattam is an adapted version of Othello against the backdrop of the Hindu Theyyam performance. In 1998, Suresh Gopi received the National Film Award for Best Actor, and Jayaraj the award for Best Director for their work on the film. Omkara is a version in Hindi set in Uttar Pradesh, starring Ajay Devgan as Omkara, Othello, Saif Ali Khan as Langda Tyagi, Iago, Kareena Kapoor as Dolly, Desdemona, Vivek Oberoi as Cassio, Bipasha Basu as Billo, Bianca, and Konkana Sen Sharma as Indu, Emilia. The film was directed by Vishal Bhardwaj, who earlier adapted Shakespeare's Macbeth as Makbul. All characters in the film share the same letter or sound in their first name as in the original Shakespeare classic. It is one of the few mainstream Indian movies to contain uncensored profanity. Other film adaptations. 1909 German, directed by and stars Franz Porten as Othello, Henny Porten as Desdemona, and Rosa Porten as Emilia. 1922 Othello, German, starring Emil Jannings as Othello, Werner Krauss as Iago, and Ike von Lenkefi as Desdemona. 1952 Othello, United States, directed by and stars Orson Welles as Othello, also starring Michi El MacLiamwar as Iago, Robert Coote as Roderigo, Suzanne Cloutier as Desdemona, Michael Lawrence as Cassio, Faye Compton as Emilia, and Doris Dowling as Bianca. 1955 Othello, USSR, starring Sergei Bondarchuk, Irina Skotseva, Andrei Popov, directed by Sergei Yutkovich. 1962 All Night Long, British, Othello is Rex, a jazz band leader, Dave Brubeck and other jazz musicians. 1974 Catch My Soul, adapted from Jack Good's rock musical, directed by Patrick McGoohan and starring Richie Havens, Lance Ligo, Season Hubley and Tony Joe White. 1982 Othello, The Black Commando, written by and starring Max H. Boulwa, with Tony Curtis as Colonel Iago and Joanna Pettit as Desdemona. 1995 Othello, with Kenneth Branagh, Lawrence Fishburne, and Irene Jacob, directed by Oliver Parker. 1997 Kaliyattam in Malayalam, a modern update, set in Kerala, starring Suresh Gopi as Othello, which won him the National Award for Best Actor. Lala's Iago, Manju Warrior as Desdemona, directed by Jayaraj. 2001 a modern update, set in an American high school, stars Mekhi Phifer as Odin, Othello, Julia Stiles as Daisy, Desdemona, and Giash Hartnett as Hugo, Iago. 2004 Stage Beauty, a romantic period drama, set in the 17th century, on the theme of male and female actors playing women's roles, with the role of Desdemona as the example. Television. 1955 Othello, aired on BBC television, with Gordon Heath as Othello. A telerecording of the broadcast still exists. 1981 Othello, part of the BBC's Complete Works Shakespeare, starring Anthony Hopkins and Bob Hoskins. 1990 Othello, a videotaped version of the last Royal Shakespeare Company production at the Other play starring Willard White, Ian McKellen, Clive Swift, Michael Grandage, Sean Baker, and Imogen Stubbs. Directed by Trevor Nunn. 2001 Othello, British made-for-TV film. A modern-day adaptation in modern English, in which Othello is the first black commissioner of London's Metropolitan Police. Made for ITV by LWT. Scripted by Andrew Davies. Directed by Jeffrey Sachs. Starring Eamon Walker, Christopher Eccleston and Keely Hawes. 2008 Othello, The Tragedy of the Moor. A 2-hour television adaptation starring Carlo Rota in the title role. Director Abe Sheikh maintains the theatrical feel of the play, while shooting in a studio-controlled environment. Also starring Matthew Desalip as Iago, Christine Horn as Desdemona, Graham Abbey as Cassio. The adaptation was co-written by Abe Sheikh and Matthew Edison. 2013 an Indian daily soap named Rangrissia was unaired on Colors TV, depicted a bit of Shakespeare's famed Othello. Music. In 1891-2, the Bohemian, Czech composer Antonín Dvořák composed the overture, Othello, Opus 93, cf. Othello, Dvořák. In 1914, the Ukrainian-born Sergei Bortkovich composed his orchestral symphonic poem after Othello, Opus 19. Chicago-based hip-hop group Q Brothers created a modern adaptation, with Othello being a record producer, called Othello, the Remix. Quote, graphic novels. Othello, an adaptation by Oscar Z. Wright, Oval Projects Limited. It was reprinted in 2005 by Can of Worms Press and includes the complete text of the play. In January 2009, a manga adaptation was published in the United Kingdom, with art by Ryuta Osada. It is part of the manga Shakespeare series by Richard Appignanesi, and is set in Venice in Carnival season. Painting. The plot, Othello and Iago, painted in oil by Solomon Alexander Hart, 1855. He also painted a watercolor version held at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Othello, a series of 60 paintings executed in 1985 by Nabil Canzo. It was published in 1996 by Nev Editions. Fiction. Christopher Moore combines Othello and the Merchant of Venice in his 2014 comic novel The Serpent of Venice, in which he makes Portia, from The Merchant of Venice, and Desdemona, from Othello, sisters. All of the characters come from those two plays with the exception of Pocket, the Fool, who comes from Moore's earlier novel based on King Lear. Iago by Nicole Gallen depicts the antagonist of the play, Iago, as the protagonist, and explores his potential motivations and history. The plot of the Portuguese-language novel Dom Casmiro by the Brazilian author Machado de Assis, a translator of Othello into Portuguese, is based upon the play. It is generally considered one of the great novels of Brazilian literature. Gallery. Othello relating his adventures to Desdemona and Brabantio from a steel engraving of a painting by Charles Westcote, 1873.